For this series, Unstoppable Power. And we've been studying how God's unstoppable power is at work in us to fulfill His purposes by His grace for the praise of His glory. The purpose of our life is the pursuit of God for the praise of His glory. Yes. At Children's Church, I always like to introduce everything first. And Children's Church, we got Children's Church for up to grades 5th grade. We're going to have someone else announce that. We're going to have someone. I got a big, large print note that says Children's Church. I'm so excited about the message that I just jumped. If you want to take your Bibles, turn to Acts chapter number 8 this morning. That's where we're going to find ourselves. Acts chapter number 8. And I am excited about what God has for us this morning, what God has for me to share. Jason Haney is a construction worker in Indiana, and this is Jason here. And Jason wanted to be a blessing, and his job site was just across from the Children's Hospital, and he decided to make this cutout of Waldo. And he made this life-size cutout, larger than life-size cutout of Waldo, and he placed it all over his job site so the children could come to the window and they could find Waldo, and when they found him, he would move him. And it just brightened up their day, and it gave them a little bit of hope through difficult times. When I was a child, I loved Where's Waldo? I loved those books, and I don't know if you ever used to look at them, but my sister and I would used to race and try to see who could find Waldo, and then if you found Waldo, you try to give the other person some hints. He's on this page, he's in this corner. And I remember as a child, I would tell my sister, act like I had found him already. I'm like, he's on this page, and I'd be looking over here because he's got to be on this page. And you kind of throw him off. But in the same way that we would look for Waldo, there's nothing like answering a world that's looking, where's joy, where's peace, where's hope? And we're able to point to Christ. We can show them where hope rests. We can show them where joy lies. We can show them where they can find peace, peace that passes all understanding. And we can share with them, we can present to them the gospel and proclaim to them the good news. See, we live in a fast-paced society, and what's very important to note is in a fast-paced society, we can get in such a hurry that we pass by all the opportunities that God gives us to do ministry. We can be in such a hurry. And I say to a fast-paced society, if we want to make a habit out of being in a hurry, then why don't we be in a hurry to obey the heart of God? Why don't we be in a hurry when He calls us to do something for others, a selfless act of kindness? May we be in a hurry to be quick to respond to His heart. I heard about a wife and a husband, and they were on vacation, and she was enjoying the beach when he got a horrible toothache. So the emergency drove him to the hospital, and there she was in the hospital, the dentist's office, and she had to get this tooth removed. And she told the dentist, she said, "Dentist, I want a tooth pulled, and I don't want no Novocaine. I want to get done as quick as possible. I'm in a hurry." And the dentist was really impressed. He said, "Ma'am, you're very courageous. You're very courageous. Not wanting any Novocaine, no pain. Which tooth is it?" And she looked at her husband and said, "Why don't you open your mouth, honey, and show him what tooth it is?" Throughout the scriptures, there's this sense of urgency. Like this lady's in a hurry. She wants to get back to her vacation. There's this sense of urgency. People are continually running. They're running from here to there. And this is very important to notice. When you look at the servant of Abraham, when he ran to meet Rebekah, he was looking for a wife for Isaac. I guess Isaac, he was really needing a wife for Isaac. So he ran to Rebekah, the servant of Abraham. If you look at Esau, he ran to meet his repentant brother Jacob. He ran. He didn't walk up to him. He ran to him. If you look at David, when he faced Goliath, he didn't stroll in the back. He ran toward the Philistines. If you look, there's so many. There's the prodigal son. When the prodigal son was coming home from the faraway country, the father didn't just kind of stroll out to see him. He ran and embraced him and fell and kissed him. When you see Jesus, when he arrived at the land of Gennesaret and he stepped off the boat, the people recognized who he was, and they ran throughout all the region. They ran from here to there, and they brought in the sick and those who were lame, and so they could find healing in him. There is a sense of urgency in the Bible, and I believe it's so important what God is stressing to us, and it implies there should be a certain sense of urgency in a believer's life, in our life. There's an urgency to obey the heart of God. We should be quick to obey and not omit when God has given us the opportunity to serve Him. When the Lord says jump, what I love about this story that we're going to see, Philip doesn't say why. He says how high. And this is so important. Obedience is not saying, give me all the reasons, give me an understanding, and then I will follow. It's saying, I will by faith follow you, and I will trust in your word. I will trust in your will. A man was reading the newspaper in his recliner when his wife came up and smacked him upside the head. And I don't know if you've ever been smacked upside the head. My wife's good at that good old smack upside the head, you know. Come on now. And he said, honey, what was that for? And she said, I found a note in your pocket. He said, Mary Lou. He said, honey. As he's thinking of an excuse, he said, Mary Lou is a horse that I bet on at the racetrack after work. She was very apologetic. She walked away. A few days passed. She comes up and gives me even a twice as hard smack upside the head. Honey, what was that for? I just want you to know that Mary Lou, your horse, just called. Philip was unlike this man, unfaithful. He was faithful and quick to obey and not omit the given opportunity that the Lord had put in his life to use his talents and abilities to proclaim the gospel. This is very important to understand. God is not looking for the most talented. He's not looking for the most qualified. What he's looking for is people whose willingness and available to him, whose hearts are open to him. Just everyday individuals who he wants to make an extraordinary impact in the world through their lives. So this brings me to the reason, why is this man Philip, this great evangelist, why is he running? Because we find in Acts chapter 8, verse number 30, it says Philip ran. Why is he running to accomplish the work of the Lord? Let's look at this. He's running because he has a mighty God to serve. Verse number 1. There arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. There's a lot here that I want to unpack. After the execution of Stephen, he was the first martyr in the book of Acts for the faith. That happens in Acts chapter number 7. It says that Saul approved of the execution, and then he said, after this execution there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem. If we're going to stop this movement, then we're going to have to eliminate this movement. We got to execute, we got to imprison, we got to evaporate this people, because they're growing at a massive rate. They're beginning to influence our society in such a way. And it said they arose. Now, do you remember in Acts 1:8 what Jesus said to the disciples? He said, I will give you power to be my witnesses in all of Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. What you find in Acts 1 through 7 is the church is established, empowered, expanding in Jerusalem. They are seeing great results. You're seeing a mighty church rising up. You're seeing about 10,000 believers gathered together following after the Lord. And now through this persecution, God is sending the proclamation of the gospel to Judea and Samaria. He's saying, I've raised you up not to stay in Jerusalem, but I'm sending you out to Judea and Samaria. And that is what is happening. They're scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. That's key. The apostles stayed in Jerusalem. What God is doing, and what Luke is expressing here, is that God is going to send ordinary men and women, everyday individuals, to have an extraordinary impact on Judea and Samaria. People like Philip. Philip, if you remember, was selected. He was one of the deacons. He helped to supply the bread to the widows and those in need. He was one of those servants. But now God says, you're my evangelist. You're the first missionary. I'm sending you out. I'm not sending the apostles out now. I'm sending ordinary people out to do extraordinary things in my name. This should give us great delight, because God has a special work for each of us. Sometimes we think that it's for the professional clergy, or it's for a professional missionary to do the work of the gospel, but it's for each one of us. God has given us talents and abilities. He's given us burdens for ministries, and it's in our hearts, and we must not believe that, oh, there's nothing that I cannot do, because we have something to offer, and God gives us an opportunity to share what we have to offer. We have a mighty God that we serve. Philip understood this. Philip understood he had a mighty God that he served, and it was a delight to do the will of God, not a drudgery. You didn't have to drag him to do the will of God. He looked forward to it. He was devoted to it. Life is filled with all kinds of trials and temptation, tribulation and test. But we can know that in the midst of it all, that God has given us power to overcome this world. There arose a great persecution. But Philip went out to proclaim the gospel. He went out to Samaria. And the Bible says that he went out to Samaria to serve the Lord. This is very important. God gives us hope in the hardest of times. In the hardships of our lives. God gives us hope. He gives us strength. He gives us power to overcome. And you really don't know, you really don't know what a person's faith is made of until it goes through the fire. The fire of hardships display what is really in a person's heart. It's in these moments where they must decide in times like these, do I sink below or do I rise above? In moments like these where they must decide in times like these, do I give up or do I go on? In moments like these, when you have to make a choice, am I going to be overwhelmed by the circumstances or will I overcome every challenge in the power of His name? It's in moments like these you really find what a faith is made of. It's when the persecution comes. It's when the tribulation comes. It's when those things come in our life where some people say you find the fruit of our faith, the fullness of our faith. Adrian Rogers, one of my favorite preachers, used to say a faith that is not tested cannot be trusted. It is moments like these where we find that the power of God is real, and it's real in our lives. I will give you power. Philip was not going to let his future be decided by his circumstances. This is very important to understand. So oftentimes we fly by the seat of our pants. Your future does not have to be decided by the circumstances that you face. You don't have to be tossed to and fro on the sea of life and you wonder, I'm just fearful, I'm worried, I'm anxious. You don't have to live that way. Because you got God living on the inside of you. Greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. And this is you don't have to let that your future be decided by the circumstances that you face, because what really matters is how you face the circumstances. It's how you face the circumstances that will decide your future. It's not what's happening to me so much as what is happening in me. It's what God is stirring up in me. See, no longer do I have to look at the circumstances and be fearful when I can look at Christ and be faithful. No longer in life do I have to look at the circumstances and wonder what the future may hold. When I can look at Christ and say, you hold my future in the palm of your hand. You hold my heart. You hold my life. You hold my all. There's nothing that we cannot achieve. What Philip teaches us, there's nothing that we cannot achieve if we will only believe in His name. A person's character is concealed in moments of comfort and convenience. A person's character is revealed in moments of challenge and controversy. If you really want to know what a person's character is like, then let them go through the fire, and you'll see their faith be revealed. You'll see the character of Christ. Too many times that in the fire, people are giving up on their potential rather than living up to their potential. Too often in times we face the fires of life and we turn away from God, when at that very moment we need to trust in Him like Philip and say, God, may you be glorified in all of this mess, all of this ugliness. May you be glorified in my life. May you be glorified in me as I testify of you. The hardships and hard times only reveal what God has what's already in our hearts. Our actions, reactions, interactions reveal our character. Therefore, if you want to see my character, you'll see it more not by where I sit on Sunday, but where I stand on Monday. And I'm going to say that again. If you really, really, truly want to see my character, it'll be more evident not where I sit on Sunday, but where I stand on Monday. Will I stand on a firm foundation? Will I live by faith and not by sight? Will I focus all my life toward Him, centered on Him? That's where faith becomes real. Not only is he running because he got a mighty God to serve, but he has a message of grace to share. He has a message of grace to share. Philip was bold to take a stand for Christ in the day of persecution. And this is saying that he wasn't afraid of losing his life for the gospel's sake, as many were being imprisoned during this time. Philip went down to the city of Samaria, verse 5, and proclaimed to them about the Christ. And then it says in verse 8, so there was much joy in that city. Let me say this, this is very important. There's a good chance that when he went to Samaria, there was deep racial and cultural divisions between him and the people. Went back centuries, 1,000 years before. Here, these deep trenches. But he came with the truth of the gospel. He came to love them. He came to care for them. He came to tear down those walls that stood between them and him, and to proclaim to them that there is life in Christ. And he shared with them the light of the world. I read about a woman who went to see her doctor, and she was looking really worried. And she said, Doctor, when I woke up this morning, I looked at myself in the mirror and everything was falling apart. My hair was frazzled, my skin was wrinkled, my eyes were bloodshot and bugging out, and I had this corpse-like feel about my body. Can you tell me what's going on with my body, doctor? And the doctor looked at her, and he looked her over for a few minutes, and he said, well, you want some good news? There's nothing wrong with your eyesight. There is a good chance that though the Samaritans despised and disrespected Philip as a disciple, that he was still devoted to the cause that Christ had called him to. I'm not sure what kind of response they might have given him, but Philip had a different perspective when it came to a value of a soul. See, that one that you may despise, that one that may discourage you, is one for which Jesus died. Philip understood that. I wonder sometimes if I'm willing to let someone rub me the wrong way so I can show them the right way. That I don't have to always share my opinion, that I don't always have to be so opinionated. I see people on Facebook, they'll alienate their friends and their family, and they always have to share their opinions. They always have to win the argument. They always have to have the last word. Let me say, what if I didn't have to have the last word? What if I didn't have to share my opinion? What if opinions are like armpits and everyone has two and they all stink? What if the truth is I didn't have to put my ideas out there because I have one truth, and that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And instead of driving you away, I want you to draw you to Him. So maybe I may not feel like I won this argument, but I want to win that battle. And that's for the souls of men. I want to see people make a decision for Christ. This was a sign of his character. This was the strength of his character. Philip was a missionary who knew the value of a soul. Philip's genuine ministry was characterized by an unquestionable and unquenchable obedience to God. Are we hesitant to obey the Lord when He's called on us? Do we display a readiness, an eagerness, a willingness when God has called us? I know that there's been times in my life where the Lord has called me to do things and I've been hesitant. I've been reluctant. But I've learned more and more, and I will continue to learn that it's better to obey quickly before I talk myself out of it. If I want to make a habit out of a hurry, may I be in a hurry to obey the heart of God. Billy loved Bonnie more than anything, but Billy could not get the courage to ask Bonnie for her hand in marriage in person. Bonnie just made his heart flutter. He couldn't get the words out, so he called her on the phone after their real nice date, and he said, Bonnie, will you marry me? And she said, of course I will marry you. And he was so excited, the weight was lifted off his shoulder, and he was elated to hear the good news that she said yes. And then she continued, who am I speaking to again? Just as she had this readiness, this eagerness, this willingness, yes, anything, everything. This is the way we approach our Christian life. Lord, before you ask, yes. Lord, before you say anything, I'm going. Wherever you want me to go, whatever you want me to do, consider it done. Before I talk myself out of it, you give me a word and I will turn left. You give me a word and I will turn right. I will do that act of kindness before I talk myself out of it. Where you discover a genuine ministry like Philip's, there will be displayed a great joy. This is very important. Where there is a genuine ministry, there will be displayed a great joy. You can't have the good news of the gospel and not have the great joy of people. When you share the great news of the gospel with the general community, you have great joy that's spread about. And that's what happened in Samaria. Great joy went about because they had a revival. And this is why Philip was running. Philip was running because he had a mighty God to serve, and he understood it. He wasn't being dictated by the persecution of the day. He was all about the proclamation of the gospel. Not only did he have a mighty God to serve, but he had a message of grace to share. He said, I got one thing on my heart, and that's the gospel. And I want to share it with anyone and everyone who will give me an ear to listen. Third, I want you to see that he had a momentary gift to seize. Now the angel of the Lord said to Philip, Arise and go toward the south to the road that goes down from Jerusalem to Gaza. This is a desert place. And he arose and he went. Very important. God was calling Philip to a desert experience. Philip, there's a revival breaking out in Samaria. There's people being saved right and left. You're seeing miraculous signs and wonders. Okay, I want you to leave this place. I want you to go to a desert. Now this is a point where Philip could have easily said, well, let me reason with you here. I don't fully understand. I got a nice pulpit. I got a nice parsonage. I got a nice package. The church is growing. I got the largest church in the community. You want me to go where? You want me to do what? No, he says he arose and he went. He had this yes in his mind before God gave him the word. Yes, Lord. You've never let me down and you never will. Yes, Lord. And he went on this 100-mile journey from Jerusalem down to Gaza into a desert place. Let me say this. God may lead you to some desert experiences, but in those desert experiences you will have divine encounters. And what I mean by that is God will show up and He will show out in your situation. You may be on your way down there and you wonder, why is God leading me this way? And God says, I have every reason in the world to lead you this way. All you have to do is put your faith in me, put your trust in me, and you will see me like you've never seen me before. We experience in our own lives this all the time. God's call in our lives. It doesn't make sense in our minds. But I pray that God puts an obedience in our hearts that though it may not make sense in my mind, there's an obedience in my heart that says, no matter what, God, I'm following you. In the desert place, he finds the CFO of Ethiopia, this Ethiopian eunuch. He's in charge of the queen of Ethiopia, all of her treasure. Here he is, the chief financial officer of Ethiopia. What's God doing? God is raising up a man who's going to shake an entire nation for His name. This is very important. There was a historian in the 2nd century who wrote about this Ethiopian eunuch, and tradition says that he actually became a great missionary in his country, proclaiming the good news of the gospel. What God is doing is He's raising someone up. But He said, Peter, I know, or Philip, I know there's a great work going on here in Samaria, but there's a person who's out here in the middle of the desert. He's traveled 500 miles to come to Jerusalem. He's on his way back. This is an opportunity that is present. This is an opportunity that is passing. He's on his way back, and his heart is prepared for me. When Philip comes upon this chariot, here he is, he chases down this chariot. I don't know about you, but I've had some awkward conversations when it comes to the gospel. And it's hard in a trivial world where people want to talk about the weather and some light things. It's hard to go into the deep things of God sometimes. People kind of like, whoa, wait, too fast, too far. And I don't know about you, but him running up on this chariot, it's like, hey, by the way, I was just passing by and wanted... This had to be a little bit awkward. Let me tell you this. When you share your faith with someone, it's going to be awkward. But don't let that awkwardness keep you from faithfulness. It's going to be awkward. But sometimes you can drop hints about what God's done in your life, and it opens their heart up to a conversation about Him. This is very important. Here he is, he chases down the chariot, and here's this Ethiopian eunuch. He's actually reading the prophet Isaiah, and he says, who is this speaking about? Is he speaking about himself? Is he speaking about someone else? And he preaches to him the good news of the gospel, given the opportunity. This is very important to understand. Philip took the moment to teach him about the one who suffered for sin and the one who can save him from sin. This Ethiopian eunuch was saved and he was baptized. And what a strange occurrence happens in the Bible. When he was baptized, he comes up out of the water and Philip is gone. He's in a city 20 miles away. This is God. God took Philip from this desert place and He put him in another city. Now I'm going to leave it there because I don't have any better explanation. It was all God. It was God's confirmation. I'm with this man. He's with you today. He's with you and He's with me and He's with us all the days of our life. He's with us in that desert experience. Some may be like that fella. He went to an eye doctor, and the eye doctor, the receptionist said, what's wrong? And the man said, I keep seeing spots in front of my eyes. And the receptionist says, have you ever seen a doctor? The man said, no, I just told you I only see spots. Sometimes all we see is spots. All we see is personalities. Sometimes all we see is conversations. All we see is trivial things. But what if God wanted us to see the souls of men, souls of women, souls of boys and girls? What if instead of just seeing spots, what if we actually seen the world as God sees it? That we would see souls with a destiny, weighing in the balance a decision about eternity. I wonder sometimes, am I just seeing spots or am I seeing souls? There's an opportunity that God has given me. This is where we're going to close. Your dependence on God and obedience to God is the greatest evidence in your life of your sincere and supreme love for Him. I can tell you all day, till my face is blue, I'm out of wind, that I love God. But my dependence on Him and my obedience to Him, His simplest command, is the greatest evidence of my love for Him. How many know this individual? How many have seen this individual? How many have seen the movie Hacksaw Ridge? How many have seen it? Okay, I warn you. I haven't seen it, but I heard it's pretty gruesome, but it shows the battle in World War II, the Battle of Okinawa. This is Desmond Doss. This is Harry Truman giving him the Medal of Honor. He didn't just wake up one day and receive the Medal of Honor. It was because of his service. It was because of his courage. Desmond Doss was looked down upon. He had a great faith in God. And when the Pearl Harbor attack happened on December 7, 1941, like many young men, his heart was stirred and he joined. He enlisted in the military service. And what is important about Desmond Doss was he didn't believe in carrying any gun. He didn't believe in carrying a knife. He enlisted as a medic, hoping that would get around that loophole. People ostracized him. They looked at him as weird. They rejected him. Even the superiors, the officers, would try to physically and psychologically abuse him to the point because they wanted him to discharge himself from the military. They wanted him to quit. But Desmond Doss, in his frail frame, he didn't. He had a courage and a back of steel and a heart of courage, and he kept going forward. He arrived at the deadliest battle in World War II, the Battle of Okinawa, and he arrived there with nothing but a Bible and his faith in God. Gunfire all around him. All he had was his Bible and faith in God. They had a 400-foot cliff that they had to climb, and they had to get to Hacksaw Ridge. And there was a network of Japanese machine guns and booby traps and all these, and he's in the midst of it all, and they climb up, and what happens is his troop, his battalion, they're fought back, and they must retreat. And at the top of Hacksaw Ridge, they'd retreat back down 400 feet down the cliff. But he disobeyed the orders. He stayed up there, and he was alone. It was him, his faith in God, and all the enemy. He did not want to leave all his comrades who had been injured and wounded in the kill zone. For the next many hours, this brave man, Desmond Doss, put his life at risk, and he ran out in the middle of the kill zone, and he began to drag his men back. And then he tied a rope around him, and he dropped him down the cliff to safety. And then he would always say this prayer. He'd say, Lord, out loud, please help me get one more. Lord, please help me get one more. He, being modest, said he only rescued 50 that day, but the people that were with him said he rescued 100. So they said they just went in the middle and said he rescued 75, but many there that day said he rescued 100. What happened was that he kept going forward, and God put this hedge of protection around him, and he kept reaching forward, and the Lord showed through, and he said, help me reach one more, and he would drag another, and he would drag another for hours on end. When he came home, it was on October 12, 1945, that the Medal of Honor was presented to him. He spent the rest of his life, and he lived to be in his 90s, but he lived the rest of his life serving in the ministry of his local church. A hero. Here's where I want to leave you today. What has God given to us? What opportunities, what talents and abilities, what moment has God presented before us, this moment that is present, this moment that is passing. And he said, I got this promise. I will lead you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will always provide for you. Will you say yes before I even ask? Because I've asked you to go into the world and to rescue the perishing, care for the dying. Will you go? Well, I need to. No. Will you go? Kind of want to. No. Will you go? Will you tell your neighbors? Will you tell your co-workers and colleagues? Will you tell your